agents of love in the world. Amen. We're going to talk about power. I'm going to do a 9-point sermon on how LeBron James is going to bring right dignity back to the powerhouse of the Los Angeles Lakers. So if you're a Laker fan, this is going to be a great sermon for you. Otherwise, just stay. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about horses. When horses are born, it's an amazing thing. They can stand within about 30 minutes, and they can walk so that they can get up and nurse within an hour. That's pretty amazing, right? How long? My mom told me that it took me longer than the pediatrician thought was normal to roll over and to sleep, or to get up and stand. Turns out I was just lazy. It wasn't that I was slow, which they were worried about that for a while. But horses are born with all sorts of ability because they have to be independent. If you think about this evolutionarily, they have to be able to move quickly away from predators. The vulnerable little foal needs to be able to move, and so getting up and being able to get along with the rest of the horses is part of their survival. That's how it works. Not so with us. We are born with these big heads for them. Their vulnerability draws us into who they are. We invest in them. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to not be babies. And we have this image of who we're supposed to be. Powerful, in control, non-vulnerable. We act as though there's nothing in the world that we need. We are captains of our own destiny. We are the people who can, self-made human beings, men and women. That struggle, that we see that as growing up, going from vulnerability to being invulnerable, capable, and yet spiritually speaking, and in many other ways, relationally, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. Jesus understood this. This story that we heard from Mark's gospel is fascinating to me on so many levels, but here's one key thing. He said this: when you go out, here's your instructions. Just bring a walking staff. Don't bring bread. Don't bring a bag. Don't bring money. Don't bring an extra tunic. Don't bring your extra pair of sandals. Don't bring your Visa card. Don't bring all the things that you could rely on. Now, my dad was a district executive for the Boy Scouts, and I was in the Boy Scouts myself. I never got past first-class rank, but that's a whole other story. But I learned this. This is the motto of the Boy Scouts: be prepared. And what be prepared meant is that you brought the right things and you knew how to use them. That was important. And so we, I think, form this attachment to our possessions, in some ways, as a way of shielding ourselves from vulnerability. If you're going to go out into the wilderness, you better stop at REI and spend about $1,000 to be able to outfit yourself against any eventuality. And yet Jesus sends his people out and says, don't bring any of it. We go to the world like this, right? Say, I'm going to figure out how can I have all the things with me. By the way, I have a theory about people are either trout or salmon. The trout and salmon look similar, right? If you took a look at them, if you don't really know, you think, is that a trout or a salmon? You kind of have to know. But they're still the shape and everything. But trout live in about a mile of the river for their whole life, but salmon go off into the sea, travel thousands of miles, and come back to spawn and die. I think people are either trout or salmon, and that what recreational vehicles are is life support scuba for trout to be able to go around the world. That's what I think. Because that way you can take all your stuff, your home, with you. We run into this every time we do our pilgrimages. And it's a challenge for all of us. What do we bring? We all tend to overpack. Always. For everything. And Jesus says, go out with just your walking stick. And it's frightening. It's vulnerable. But I think that's the point. When you go out without your big backpack, what you have to do is practice what I call Blanche Dubois evangelism. You have to rely on the kindness of strangers, right? You have to go to a house and say, "Can you take me in?" That's what he says. And go there and then stay there. And that changes the power dynamic. It makes you vulnerable. Wouldn't it be better, you might think, if we just really funded that mission you're going to do, so wherever you went you could get a nice hotel, buy your own, SUV, take care of yourself? In fact, you could even do that with your message. You could show up with the idea of, I in my backpack have all the answers to all your spiritual questions. I know everything. You have nothing. Let me come bring my thing and give it to you. It's exactly what we've done for centuries, and it is exactly what's wrong with our understanding of evangelism. Good news, which is what evangelism is supposed to be a two-way street. I'm going to bring my understanding of the world, but I want to bring my ears so I can hear yours. I want to learn at least as much as I want to teach. I have convictions and truths that have been life-giving for me as a follower of Jesus. But I need to know your worldview. I need to understand how the world works for you. And not so I can change your mind, but instead so I can accept your hospitality of your generous welcome. When we go in that way, different things happen. I think that making the shift from bringing truth to being ones who listen with our truth is an important one for the church right now. When I was at Central City Lutheran Mission, we always had people who would come and they would bring meals on Sunday nights. We'd have worship, and afterwards there would be a meal for all the people who were staying there, like 70 to 100 people who were homeless and folks in the neighborhood. And then a church would come and they would bring dinner. And we had one rule. The one rule was, if you're going to bring dinner, you have to stay and eat dinner. You don't get to just serve the dinner. Why? Because just serving maintains an unequal relationship. It imagines a world in which I am always the giver and you are always the receiver. And that's never, ever true. Not even in the moment of being in a soup kitchen. Because when you finally do, after you give someone some food and then you get your own plate and you sit down next to them, you discover how much you can receive. And you find out that the person who is sitting next to you has a rich history and has stories that can change your understanding of what it means to be on the street, who can teach you things about what the incarceration system means or about the struggles of being an undocumented immigrant in our country. They can change your view, but you have to stop serving and sit down and dine. And that puts you in a place of vulnerability. And when I ask people, it's funny, people who will come and they'll say, well, I was going to go out and eat with the folks, but I felt like I need to do some cleanup. And it's like, well, what are you afraid of? What's going to happen? And every single time we got people who said that they had significant change, it was because they sat down with people and ate. And they say it this way. They say, I came to feed people and I was fed. That's, I think, what I mean by two-way evangelism and a good understanding of power. We are most powerful not when we have our hands with stuff we're just giving, but when we have our hands out to receive. This, by the way, that hand position is the, for liturgy nerds, that is the Oran's prayer position. You hold your hands out like this. I do this, you might see me do it sometimes when we're praying the Lord's Prayer. I've taken to the holding my hands out, and I invite you to try it, because what it does is this has a feeling that is also very powerful. This has a different feeling as well. And so try it. It feels like I'm asking, maybe I'm even begging for the things that I really need in my life. When you get in that place, it's humbling. But it also, I think, is important for us. We are in this crazy era of trying to deal with power. The Me Too movement has been helping us understand the way in which misogyny and patriarchy and sexism have ruled in pretty much all sorts of different, every different area of work. And we have to instead see the way in which power gets used. All of us have power inside of us, and the main way in which we can do great empowerment work is to do power with. How can you share your power and I can share my power in a way that's mutually beneficial and enhancing? It's not the violence of power over or the abuse of power under, but instead says, let's figure out how to work on these things together. The bottom line is, I think we need to get rid of our stuff, both physically and metaphorically. We need to get rid of our addictions to being right. We need to deal with the fear that if I was ever vulnerable, then I might get, I can refuse to be vulnerable and still be in the intimacy that I desire in my life. Because really, the only way that we get the love that we so deeply want is when we allow ourselves to be hurt. So, I think that the mission of the church is for us to exchange our basilicas for backpacks. And I don't mean big backpacks. I mean day packs. I mean something to bring a water bottle. Something where we are going out into the world not with our history and strength, but instead with our questions and our convictions and our deep desire for connection. Means we have to move from being experts in things to being learners. This very thing that's happening right now, I envision in the future we need to switch the microphone, where it's not just this guy, the seminary trained guy who wears this, who gets to talk, but instead we talk to each other, because each of us are having revelations of God in our lives all the time, and we are not as rich as we could be when we have experts that only get to talk. Why do I say all that? Because at the end of that chapter that I read, or that passage, we see this. They, the people of God, were able to drive out demons and heal sickness. They were able to be agents of healing and hope in a society that was broken and divided. Sound familiar? We are called to be those people who bring healing and hope in this divided world right now. And we'll only do it when we understand how power works. This is true power. It's not found in money. It's not found in military might. It's not found in whether your political party's winning. It's found in vulnerability and in caring for the least of these. Amen. Our song of response is to the tune of